adjust that, you see we're roughly between the third and fourth quartile. So on page 16, we talked earlier about the distribution, O&M, and we talked about the capital. So what this is for fiscal year 12-13, our capital expenditure per depreciation. So that's looking at how fast are you replacing the assets. And we count first quartile as you're replacing the assets much quicker, you're spending more money on capital. In the fourth quartile, you're not spending enough in capital. And you can see where we are is down at the bottom of third quartile, and that's for fiscal year 12-13. And on the 3-year average, we're also at the bottom of third quartile. What that means is, to be best practice, we need to spend more money in infrastructure, which goes back to the distribution O&M, because we know that's high. It's driven by not spending enough in the infrastructure.
Let me ask you a question. I mean, so you also have on the chart there distribution depreciation. So do these numbers speak to the financial aspects solely of maintaining fewer assets, or is this really something that we need to start focusing more time on? Because I could understand if we're on a slower schedule from depreciation that the numbers would be where they're at. But if it truly means that we have to do more on the capital side of things, which story is it telling me? Is it the former or the latter?
It's the latter. We need to spend more money on capital. Our assets, which this basically is just saying how much expense for the year of previous assets. Our assets are getting older, and we need to start replacing them more. Reliability on the power side. So this is our SAFE, which is the System Average Interruption Frequency Index, is first quartile, and our SAIDI, which is the duration, that's just below first quartiles and second quartile. These are very good. This is, we have a reliable system, and especially compared to the national panel, you can see that's something. Again, the combination distribution O&M, we want to lower that. The distribution capital, we want to spend more to do that, but we don't want to impact these reliability numbers going forward. Safety, this is, when we look at this lost time incident rate, you can see this is not a good number. We're 1.7, which is fourth quartile. Now, part of this, and again, we have here, when we looked at the American Public Power, the very same number, the 1.7, is in the second quartile. So with only against public power, we're second quartile. When this is against a lot more investor-owned utilities, we're in fourth quartile. It points to some difference in the reporting, I think, that the investor-owned utilities do versus what the publicly owned utilities do. We would expect if you're in the fourth quartile here, you'd also be fourth quartile in the recordable incident rate. Between the two of them, I can't draw any conclusions other than there's something different between the investor-owns and what the public power does on this safety.
So this really, I guess, begs a couple of questions. Are we accommodating employees? Are we figuring out how to get them back to work sooner versus sort of the severity of the actual incident?
Right. I mean, again, that's something that I think we have to, as we move forward, and certainly recent safety, we're going to have to work a lot harder on that. But it's something we're going to have to do to move towards best practice.
And from a workers' compensation perspective, we're self-insured, aren't we?
We on workers' compensation, correct?
Oh, but we're self-insured. We don't. We have a third-party administrator or somebody who handles all of these incidences and time off.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
So losses. So the losses, when you look at this, again, you can see we're fourth quartile, 13.1%. This is made up of both transmission and distribution losses. So the transmission, you have to remember. We have roughly 60% of our power come from the other side of Las Vegas. We have Intermountain Power Project, 40% of our power. Palo Verde is 10% of our power, and Navajo is 10% of our power. So that's 60% that is coming from the other side of Las Vegas. So we know that our losses are going to be high. However, one of the items that we see is that we have to work on is our distribution only is 4.6%. That's higher than it should be. And we're in the process right now of hiring a third-party consultant to come in and help us on the electric side to try to identify and mitigate any potential non-technical line losses. You can see that in the last bullet, such as non-billed customers, fraud, energy theft. On the power side, this is, like I said, quite high.
Now, on this is actually I think is a very important slide here. So we're not doing nearly as well as we need to be doing on losses.
Right.
Do you have a sense for how much in dollars that means to us, or as a percentage of rates?
So 1% of our revenue would be roughly $32 million, somewhere in there.
So this is about $150 million worth of revenue that is lost?
No, you're going to have line losses no matter what.
Sure.
And so when you look at this, it's probably something we should be, and we have other panels, American Public Power, that we've looked at. We should probably be somewhere close to 3.5–3%. That's what we're going to investigate. We're going to have a contractor come in and look at and basically compare the power that goes through our stations to how much we're billing customers. And we're going to go out and look and try to find the differences there to see those non-technical line losses.
So acceptable losses are around 3%. So we're about 2% outside of what's acceptable.
1.5, yeah.
1.5, 2%. Just so at 1.5%, what would that mean in terms of dollars?
So that's roughly 45 million, somewhere in there.
And would that be also about 1.5% in terms of current rates? Is it that easy of a?
It's not quite that easy, but
so
it's
45 to $50 million that we're losing that we can't account for, and if we were to be on par with other municipal or publicly owned utilities, we'd be closer to only 3% loss.
Somewhere in the 3%, and again, that's where we're in the effort. The RFP, I believe, is going out this month to bring in an expert to help us to go out and find it. Something we're attacking. You'll see in the last page our action steps. This is something we're attacking right away.
Sure, no, and I want to drill down on that a little bit more, but I just think it's important to understand that we can't account for about $50 million in the system that's sort of outside of what is an acceptable loss.
I would say that the benchmark says you should be somewhere close to the 3% that we talked about. We're at 4.6. We need to identify why are we 1.6% higher.
Sure. And we want to be better, obviously, but
we want to
norm
get to the median is somewhere at 3%. So that's I guess I would more technically call it that. And then financial statement ratios. So on the left-hand side, this is an important financial metric. So this is net income per revenue dollar. So that means how much money do we have left over when we receive our revenue. We have all of our operating costs, our fuel purchase power, our debt service costs, city transfer, all those things. How much is left? And you can see basically 4.3%. So what that tells you on a comparison basis, our rates are very low given our costs, because from a financial basis, and the investor-owned utilities will be farther up here where they're basically showing somewhere in the 11% range of net income after they've paid all those different things. So this shows that our rates are pretty low relative to our costs. The uncollectibles, now this was before our new customer information system. So even before our new customer information system, we had bad debt uncollectible of 0.7%. Now that 0.7% in fiscal year 13-14 was 1.7%. So that's something that we have to attack. We saw all the recent articles on the state audit and whatnot, but this is something that we've got to get back down to somewhere close to the 0.3%. It's a challenge to do when you put in a new customer information system, no question, but we're again bringing in a third-party expert. RFP is going to hit the street this month, that we're going to look at the correct policies and procedures to get us into this 0.3% range.
So just to drill down a little bit here, so prior to the rollout of the new billing system, Syscon is what it's called.
Correct.
We were at 0.72% of uncollectibles of the sort of entire revenue of the enterprise.
Right.
And so 0.72% means how much in dollars?
So every 1%'s about $34 million.
So this is about $20 million.
Yeah, something like that.
Dollars.
It was $23 million was the 0.7%.
So help me reconcile. So when I saw a recent report on the rollout from Syscon, it says that we've lost we have been unable to collect about $241 million thereabouts because of the system. Prior to that, there was about $500 million or so, hard to say or so, that was uncollected. 500 million versus 25 million, that doesn't sort of compute to me. So
the number that I believe you're talking about.
So give me the segments of
Sure,
sort of what uncollected means.
So the numbers you're talking about is our account receivable. So that's how much our customers have been billed and they owe us for services that have already been provided.
And so what's that universe of what's owed to us in accounts receivable right now?
Right, yeah.
So what is that? How much?
That was the number, I think it was 681 that was quoted in that state audit.
So 681, well,
Right.
forget the state audit. What is it according to the department?
Right now, that number is about 640 million.
So $640 million in outstanding accounts receivable,
Right,
including Syscon.
right.
Prior to Syscon being rolled out, what was our
It
outstanding?
was roughly 200 million less than that.
200 million. So when you say 0.72 here, you say it only means about 25 million. So that's just a segment of what's unaccounted.
Right, so the accounts receivable, we'll go through and we're going to collect all those dollars, and you're always going to run that balance. You know, we talk back to the historical number, you're always going to have that. But at the end of the day, some people who won't pay their bill and we're not going to be able to collect that, that's the write-off that we're talking about here, the 0.7%. We will not write off that entire amount that we just discussed on the accounts receivable.
The 681 million.
Right, that's just what people owe us. We're going to go out and collect that. You know, we're doing a variety of things now to do that.
Okay, so that helps sort of put this in context. So where we are right now in terms of what we believe we're going to write off, appropriately so, would be about $25 million or so, because that's 0.72%. The sort of median would be less than that, would be 0.25%.
0.3%, right, so roughly half of that. Right?
Okay, so for a utility the size of DWP, where we should be striving to only charge off, write off, is about $13-14 million
Somewhere in that range.
annually.
Right.
And right now we're going to write off about 25 or 30, and we've got a universe of over $600 million out there uncollected.
That is accounts receivable, not uncollected. but
Accounts receivable. Okay.
Okay, so next we're going to jump into water. So again, on the rates for water, here's our comparison. You can see we're very competitive with really the only local city shown here that's lower than us is Pasadena. We have very high purchase water costs. The drought, and again, we've seen all the articles, and the snowpack is not very good, so our purchase water costs, even back in 12-13, was higher. But we are still very competitive when you look against these not neighboring cities, but California cities. Our rates nationally, on the left-hand side is the large utility companies. So this is national. There's a lot more utilities on a national basis that they do not have an aqueduct like we have to import the water. And so the cost of this, you can see, is, you know, we're fourth quartile because they're not importing water, and they're generally sinking wells somewhere close, and their water supply is very close. In the western region, you see we get a little bit closer. We're in third quartile because they're more of the western region. This is all American Waterworks, by the way. They are importing water as well. And it's important to remember roughly 10% of that number is related to environmental mitigation that's associated with Owens Valley. So somewhere in the order of $4.75 is tied to that. And we'll get into some of the metrics on the cost side. So water system O&M, again, similar to the power side. If there's one metric that you could look at, this is the important metric. And you can see we're third quartile on the O&M cost per customer. We're near the median on the western region. This is very good. This is where you want to be. And this also, you can see in the second bullet here, includes $56 million for the LA Aqueduct O&M costs. If we take that out, which many other utilities will just have that as purchased water, it won't be an O&M cost. It improves everything by one quartile. So customer service, now the very same thing that we were just looking at where we are first quartile or too low a cost against the American Waterworks Association benchmark, now we're in fourth quartile. So this, in the American Waterworks, is going to tend to be more publicly owned utilities. So again, it's a different business philosophy that's being utilized here between the investor-owned utilities that will spend more in customer service, and here, because it's again against the publicly owned, we're in fourth quartile for that. We have to look at customer service. We know we've got to improve it, and so this is going to be a big part of the second phase of the benchmark. So losses, same thing that we talked about on the power side where we looked at that. You can see here we're pretty good on the water side. We're second quartile on the national panel in the region, and the western region. We're in the third quartile. So you look here in the western region, it's 2.1. We're about 3.5%, where 2.1 would be the median, which is really generally the target you're going to shoot for. And then on the reliability side, this is unplanned service disruptions per customer. So this is essentially like a SAFE that you have on the power side. We're second quartile, which is pretty good. We're below the median, so it tells you we have a fairly reliable system despite we know some very highly publicized events. On a per customer basis, we're in pretty good shape for that. So next steps. So following the board presentation here, we're going to do a stakeholder outreach campaign. We're going to look to solicit feedback and where we should do more in-depth analysis. But immediate things we're going to do. Energy losses, we had a discussion about that. We're going to retain a third-party consultant to help us in identifying and implementing measures to substantially reduce that. Uncollectibles, we're getting a third party we talked about already to cost effectively assist us in identifying and collecting those outstanding funds owed in a timely manner. Distribution O&M, we're going to have to look at that as we move forward. We need to look at the functions and sub-functions, and we need to try to lower that distribution O&M, but again, without impacting reliability. And as we make those capital investments, we know that's going to get better. Customer service costs, we've got to evaluate those resource levels and look at the different strategies between the investor-owned utilities and the publicly owned utilities, and identify the areas where we can have cost-effective changes that will improve customer service, move towards industry best practice, which we're not there today. And then A&G, we'll continue to look at that, but again, with the last MOU, we've made substantial progress with the new pension tier, especially with the demographics of our workforce.
So on the A&G, when do you think we start seeing that sort of move the needle? Is that 5 years from now?
That's what I would say is 5 years.
After the 40% or so matriculate through the system?
Right, and then also you've got, just because that's tied to the pension costs, which generally have a 5-year smoothing as well, it's slow to reflect on a accounting basis, even though in reality the market costs may have moved more.
Has so in the analysis that you all are in phase 2, are you contemplating if we were able to, and I think these are amazing next steps, and I think it should be noted that the utility, the story here is long overdue. I think it's important for people to understand where we are relative to other utilities, both publicly owned and privately owned, or California versus the rest of the country. And I think it's a very good thing for us to have done this. So thank you. It's incredibly informative. And I think that it also tells a story that the utility does do a very good job putting out reliable, dependable energy and water, albeit with old infrastructure and probably not with as good of customer service as we deserve to give to our ratepayers. And I think it's further contemplated that we could be doing a much better job controlling for losses as well as our accounts receivable. So I think this is very good. In terms of sort of your next steps, will you then help us understand if we were performing at a median level across the board, what that would mean in terms of savings and improved service to our customers? Because today, the percentages are important. It tells us where it is that we need to begin to manage the utility better. But it doesn't, I think, really speak clearly, to me at least, how much more we could be saving ratepayers in future rate increases and increase service and customer service. That story is unclear. Will that be part of your second phase, so we can start shooting towards these sort of dollar amounts versus just percentages?
Exactly. I mean, that's the whole second phase of where we're going to start looking at this. And this really, in a lot of these steps for the energy losses, uncollectible, certainly those two things are immediate steps. We're really doing third phase. We're just moving to it to see how much money we can reduce it. It will obviously, we haven't finalized anything, but it will shave pieces off, but it's not, there's so many other challenges that we have.
Clearly, but I think anything that we can shave is incredibly important
It's
here
important.
because we're anticipating having conversations in the future about rate increases, and the question I think becomes for all of us is what is it that we can and must do to make sure that we stave off any rate shock in the future.
Right.
And so right off the bat, when I look at the uncollected accounts and energy losses, I want to wonder out loud with you, what does that mean in terms of if we were just average, which we're not, we're below, how much would we be saving the ratepayer?
Right, so it's, again, on the energy losses, I think as we talked about, we're looking, and it'll take some time to do it, but we're trying to get, our goal is somewhere like a 1 to 1.5% reduction of what would otherwise be of where our energy losses are on the distribution side. Our uncollectible, I mean, the 1.7 is where it is for last year, and we're going to try to shave it down. It's going to take some time. It's going to be policies and procedures.
Sure.
But, if you go from 1.7 to even a 0.3, which we identified as the median, that's 1.4%.
Sure,
So,
but the story is pretty sort of damning at this point. 0.72 to jump up to 1.74. We more than doubled how ineffective we were, and par is 0.3.
right.
So, and those are good numbers to know, but does that mean that I would be able to save ratepayers in the future 3% less increases, 2%, $400 million? I mean, I think that's where we need to be able to tell a better narrative. What does it mean for the ratepayer?
Right. We need to be able to get there. I don't want to tell you a number right now until, that's the reason why, as you see on both of those bullets, we have retained third-party consultant immediately, because we want to attack that problem. We see it as a problem. We want to attack it and solve it as quickly as we can.
So clearly we haven't been doing anything with third-party folks prior to this because we have this problem, clearly.
On the electric side, I'm unaware of that being done. On the uncollectibles, this is again something new where we're trying to look at what best practice is, bring that best practice in so that we can move towards that.
How is it? Can you give me a target when you think we go live after an RFP, after the selection? If people are implementing their ability to try to recover money from the rate base?
So the RFP is going out this month, so then we'll have probably another month that the RFP is out there. I would hope that in the summertime we're going to have those consultants on board and helping us to reduce down those numbers. It'll still take time to do that. And even on those, the energy losses, we have some other areas within DWP tied to our metering where we're looking at, and we're going to use some boots on the ground to try to go out and reduce that as well.
Very good. Colleagues? Mr. Koretz?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know our energy losses benchmark seems relatively high.
Mm-hmm.
How much of that is because we have plants in remote locations, and are we looking to address that by moving towards more local power in the future? So
as we talked about, roughly 8.5% of that 8.5% is the losses tied to the transmission out of that 13%, which is tied to the plants, because we have very large plants that are on the other side of Las Vegas, producing about 60% of our power. One of them, Navajo, we're in the process of getting out, which will bring us closer. Still, on an economic basis, what our Energy Control Center does, hour by hour, is they look at where is the cheapest power that we can bring in, and they compensate for those losses. So even though the losses are higher, bringing it from the other side of Las Vegas, it's still more cost-effective than running something here in Los Angeles. If the one in Los Angeles is cheaper, that's the one we'll run, and they do that hour by hour.
So doing more rooftop solar and other things like that, does that not?
No, that helps
reduce,
because that reduces down the power that you've got to bring in.
So are we looking at more of that partly from that angle to reduce the cost?
All of that rooftop solar, all of that will help.
And are there any kind of matrices and comparisons with other places around our breaking pipes and water mains and the condition of those and our plans to replace them compared to others? How do we?
So
we fit.
If you look at this metric right here, total unplanned service disruptions per customer on the water side, that is the reliability, the best, the American Waterworks Association reliability metric. And so if you look at that on a per customer basis, obviously we've had some very high profile pipe failures.
I've noticed a few of those.
Yeah, but despite that, our reliability is still in the second quartile, which is pretty good. It doesn't mean we shouldn't be out there replacing that infrastructure. We've got to do that. The infrastructure is getting older. Big parts of it were built at the end of their service life, and will be at the end of their service life.
Now, I don't know if I've paid more attention to it because all the massive breaks have been in my district over the years since I've been here, but it seems like we're having rather than just the little breaks that we have, we've had some really major breaks.
Right.
It's hard to get them all in CD5. Good job. But
How does that compare to other places?
We're significantly higher. Is that the point here? That we're way above average in having reliable water delivery. Is that right?
No, actually, this indicates that we're better. These numbers here, we're 1.1. And you can see basically 1.94 for the western region.
Above
and
average.
3. We're above
Way
average. We're above average, right. But again,
so that's the number of incidents, but what we've lost in the major incidents, how do we compare in terms of the actual amount of water and all that? So
and again, the water, this is fiscal year 12-13, was this metric here, the real losses. So this is what percent of our water do we lose. That includes evaporation. We're 3.5%. In the western region, it's in the third quartile, but it's relatively close to the median. On the national panel, they won't have as much evaporation sometimes, depending on how they store their water. But our losses aren't too bad right now.
Interesting. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, may I?
Yes, Mr.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for that report. Mr. Pickle, nice to see you. Don't take this personally. I just believe when your term is up, whoever's the next person, there should be a resident of Los Angeles. I just wanted to make that point because I think I'm proud of Los Angeles residents who work for the city and such the important role. I know it'll take a charter change, but Mr. CLA, will you note that as a recommendation that the ratepayer advocate should live in the city of Los Angeles? And you were an excellent resident of the 4th District and very involved, but I know Pasadena, my wife's from Altadena. It's a pretty town, but there's nothing like being in LA, and you got an important role. That's number one. Number two, in one hand here, we're an older city. If you go back to right now, 2 years, in 1915, we would have had 2 years of the aqueduct, and the city had sprawled. And if you look at the annexations on the city clerk's map in the 3rd floor, you'll see how the city was built together. 3 things built the city of Los Angeles. First and foremost was our water and power department to fill the Pueblo. Next was the Port of Los Angeles, which I was at noon for the 30th anniversary of the Israeli-United States trade agreement. And then the other, from the port comes the airport, which is all dynamic engines that make a difference. The life of people in Los Angeles make a difference because the reliability of what Los Angeles Water and Power can do. But we are old, we are old, and things are getting old, and you have to fix them. And then you're not the only person in the street. There's a sewer line in the street. There's a cable line that's still there for other reasons, and all the way down the line. So it's a complicated matter. I do believe, Mr. Chairman, in this effort as we go forward, we got to look at it strategically and by region of the city. When we had an outbreak, not of the massive UCLA designed by, the devil, because it was just a natural to have a break that came right into Pauley Pavilion in the way it worked. It was unfortunate of that tragedy but fortunately no one was injured to the extent, but it was just an unbelievable way it happened. But many of the breaks were of a precast of a different era. The oldest pipes in the city have not broke because of material that may be the content in the pipes. Is that correct?
I would have to bring Marty up to answer.
Marty Adams, come up here front and center, because when we had the last rash of breaks, the Los Angeles Times, I believe, did a survey, and most breaks were west of Hoover, because saying that Hoover is the old part of Los Angeles.
Yes, and what's happened, if you look at all the pipes, so we're replacing the pipe now basically the first time since the city was built. So
Right.
the pipe infrastructure, it really is a reflection of the city's construction and areas where we annexed, like the whole Venice area was annexed. And so we have a lot of pipe, all the same age coming into the system. And Councilman Koretz, that's exactly what we're facing in your area. We have a lot of pipe kind of coming of age, all in the same part of town, all in West LA area. So, and then you look at the valley, it's all newer pipe relatively, and it's basically a reflection of the development of the city. The difference being that when all this pipe was installed, people were not living on top of it. The streets were waiting to be paved, the buildings were waiting to be built. So now we have to construct this infrastructure with everyone superimposed on top of it. So it's a different situation than when it originally, but it's basically an exact reflection of the growth of the city.
And then there's a 66-in main line of the River Supply Conduit bypass line coming through Silver Lake. When Herman Silver, the Water and Power Commissioner, who they named it after, was around in 1904, there was nobody living there.
That's correct.
Boom, you could
We have
just
the
do it right
photographs,
down
and
the
there's
street.
a lot of hills with two houses.
So there's some of these challenges are there, plus the other combinations of the departments. I also think I'd rather see a pie than a square, just to let you know. And there's a pie that it shows the slice of where it is. The square, I think I'm watching Jeopardy or something like that. So just a thought, and but I did listen to what you said on that issue. I think we have to teach people about the importance of water and power and the agency, and I think there should be clear distinction from PG&E, Southern California Gas, and Edison and what it means. And I do believe, and I see Joe Romallo back there, that they are developing a 24-hour PIO, because we live in a real city that has real time, like the fire department or police department, can answer questions, because usually there's an incident, and usually the fire department answers first because they're on scene, but DWB has to be on scene now because everybody's focused on it. I do love the Department of Water and Power because I love the history of the city of Los Angeles. But yet as a team, I think we could do a better job in telling what we do and getting in the huddle and moving down the field. And I know I work with, not with Rich Harisick, but with Steve Cole. And Steve Cole, I see, because we have a nice rule, members, no work on streets during rush hour. So there's a lot of people sitting that could be working, and we got to figure that out because we're never going to get the infrastructure. And I want to ask one thing, too, that you got to partner with other departments and like get DOT officers or create a class of officers who could direct traffic so you can get your work done. Because we're not going to get the work done unless because it's as much as everybody wants everything new, it takes time to do that. So, Mr. Chair, I think this is a very good first step of many steps that need to be taking place. And I think educating the public, both not just on the Southern California issue, but where our power comes from, where we're partners with, what it all means, and also the issues of the future. The governor issued 20% reduction today, is that right?
25.
25% there. So this is very serious. And I want to put, I know reclaim's on here. Reclaim's real important to use water appropriately to help in many areas. So I thank you, Mr. Chair, for having this on the calendar. Thank you, Water Power. And I thank you, Mr. Pickle, for your continued great service to Los Angeles via the Gold Line.
Mr. Koretz, anything else? Very good, colleagues. Well, again, thank you for the presentation. This is incredibly informative. It really begins to, as Mr. Labange says, help us understand where it is that we need to improve. And I think the story so far is a good one. We are more than competitive on our rates on electricity, with the exception of one municipality. We are better than most on water. But we could stand to do much better by the customers in terms of collecting unaccounted for revenues, mitigating losses, and making sure that customers have the service that they deserve, and it sounds like we're going to get working on that, so I appreciate it. We will go ahead and note and file item number 1. My apologies, we do have one card.
Just a technical question before the card. Will the department, because I know our colleagues are interested in this, probably want to have a more prepare for some presentation in council that members may have questions on this, so that's just an idea.
Whatever you want.
That's a great idea, Mr. Labange. We'll figure out how to, after we get back from our break, facilitate a hearty conversation so we can tell the story and the room for improvement for the Department of Water and Power. Ruth Sarnoff.
Good afternoon. My name is Ruth Sarnoff. I guess my first question is what role the State Public Utilities Commission plays in the oversight of the Department of Water and Power. And also, as you know, they're having a lot of questions are being in that direction as to what kind of state regulatory work they've been doing. So I wanted to bring that to your attention, and maybe someone might comment on that. You've chosen to fixing the public land in terms of the sidewalks and in terms, it looks like maybe of the pipes, the replacing piping, and this, there's other things, other perhaps solutions to some of this. I noticed that there's very little community participation, and you're not hearing much these days from neighborhood councils, but I think that the onus of the mistakes of the Public Utilities Commission or DWP or any other public body should not become the basis for the ratepayers having to pay more and more, and while they're using less and less or trying to, and so there seems to be a contradiction in some of this stuff. And I would suggest that there be some more open process that brings the neighborhood councils together in this matter.
I just wanted to say, Mr. Chairman, I believe, I see Wendy Yancey here, the department has in the past, but they will in the future, like they have Civic Public Works Day here, they'll be opening up, I believe, the DWP outreach to the neighborhood councils and have like a DWP Day at Water and Power, because I know we discussed it with some others. I'm sorry the mechanism is not here. But anyway, so thank you for those good points, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. We'll go ahead and note and file the matter in as much as it was submitted for informational purposes, but we are going to request the Department of Water and Power to report back on its Phase 2 review upon its completion. We'll go ahead and table number 2 for a second here. I know that Mr. Labange is eager to get to items 3 and 4. Let's go ahead and move on to item number 3.
Certainly, Mr. Chair. Item number 3. Department of Water and Power report in response to motion, Labange Fuentes, on the technical feasibility unit cost to expand the use of recycled water. The customers of Griffith Park. We have Marty Adams from Department of Water and Power. And
Rec and Parks is here too.
oh, okay. Representatives of Rec and Parks as well.
Yeah, oh, good.
Tom's here.
Mr. Adams?
Thank you very much, Marty Adams from Department of Water and Power. So in response to, are we taking both these motions together?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
we'll take 3 and 4 together.
So in response to the motions is regarding the use of recycled water in Griffith Park and along Caltrans right-of-ways for the sides of freeways. We've been working very closely with Rec and Parks in Griffith Park to look at the recycled water uses and the potential to expand that. We have a project that's actually under construction. It's the Griffith Park South Water Recycling Project. It's the panel on the left there, and it'll take water that's produced by LA Sanitation at the LA Glendale Water Reclamation Plant. That water is already moves across the freeway into the area of the golf courses. We're going to tap an existing line, build a pump station and take it to a tank site that used to be in service with the Rec and Park system. And then we'll bring it down toward Roosevelt Golf Course, the nursery, and some other areas like the median area in Vermont. One of the things that we've been actively working with Rec and Parks on is how far we can expand that use of water. And so two things come into play. One is what's the elevation that tank has pressure to push water, how far can we push water in the system? And then the other question is, because installing pipe is expensive, how far can we stretch that water supply and know that there's going to be some sort of economically viable payoff so that we know that we're going to offset enough demand. And so we are expanding that. We do know there's a number of increasing demands on the LA Glendale plant as a whole. There's a lot of growth envisioned for more use of water from that facility. But we have a project going on currently. We do have the opportunities to expand, and we continue to work with Rec and Parks on that area. Tom, you want to address anything on that?
Yeah, we are looking at several areas of Griffith Park to bring recycled water to, especially along Zoo Drive, along the north side. There's already the Greenbelt line there, which we can hook into quite easily with fairly low cost to bring water to the picnic areas along Zoo Drive and all the way out to Martinez Arena, which is on the western side of the north part of the park. And then also we'll be looking at, although we can't bring recycled water to the Los Feliz Park entrance to the park because of the cost effectiveness of that line, we are going to be using DWP funding to do a redo of all the irrigation in that area and upgrade that, so it'll be a much more efficient irrigation system to the front of the park.
So along those lines, you have a couple of things working. One is use of recycled water where it makes sense to offset enough potable water use, and then the other is to do as Tom said, to make the irrigation system more efficient so that we use the least amount of water as possible, as well as they also just installed a California-friendly landscape in the median area going into the Los Feliz entrance of the park, off Los Feliz there.
So can I ask a question? Does this water get to the Vermont Hillhurst parkways?
Not at this point.
What's the big deal? I don't understand. You're coming to Commonwealth Yard, right?
We're coming to Commonwealth.
And then you're going across to Roosevelt Golf Course.
Correct.
Yeah, and the Roosevelt Golf Course supply is fed from you see that the yellow, orange line is at the back end of the golf course because that's where the irrigation service is. So the question, and we've looked together because there's talk about maybe replumbing Roosevelt Golf Course, is that it's getting through the golf course. So if the service was at the west side of the golf course, then water would be brought further over. So it's the amount of water that would have to make that last stretch.
How do you do that last stretch?
Well, it'd either have to go through the roadway or through the golf course, and it'd be a good amount of pipe to put in. So the question is that
You got pipe. I've seen your yards. You got pipe all over town, right?
And so the question is just the cost of installation versus the amount of water offset. We will use all the recycled water available that we have. The question is whether it makes more sense to expand it in that area or
I just think the tough thing is that pretty soon they're going to pick a call on all grass, all grass, all lawns. And right here, you have this parkway that is grass that welcomes people to the park. And I think it's important to see lawns and grass. Not everybody has it on that point. So I don't see how the city could maintain such a large parkway, a desert-type landscape, xeriscape there on Vermont, which you're responsible for, correct?
I believe that one of the issues is that there's a lot of vehicle traffic on those parkways. A lot of trucks actually drive over that. I'm not sure why they do that. But
on the Vermont Parkway?
On the parkways themselves, which could damage the recycled water lines, which could cause problems.
Man, I've been up there every day since 1978, and I've never seen a truck. I've seen some guys from Hollywood High, not Marshall, but Hollywood High, some Hamilton High, and one guy from San Fernando High, man. No. So I don't know, but I just think I'd like to. This is very important because this is kind of news to me because I thought you were going to get to the parkway.
We're looking at, we're always looking for how much we can expand.
Got it.
And as the golf course system is looked at, if there's opportunities to bring that water further, we will. The bottom line becomes that is a certain amount of money to put new pipe in, and will we offset enough use at that location to make that the best use of the ratepayer dollars, or are there other locations that we can offset potable use with recycled water that maybe cost less for the ratepayers? So that's really what we're balancing.
Yeah, well, this is a little tough because, I only have 12 weeks or whatever it is, but I mean, I fought all the time for the river supply conduit. I regret, and this is, colleagues, what you believe in, even though they can't do it all at once, ask for it all at once. Because all of a sudden, your time is up, and you didn't get what you should have got. I felt if I criticize myself, I should have banged the drum for reclaimed water more. I was more focused on trying to get your other projects through, which were massive and very important. But I just think it's necessary because water brings life, and for the Parkway, where will the governor one day say no more watering lawns? And will that take us out of that, and how are you going to maintain it? Because you're going to have to maintain it, and you don't have the staff to, and it's a beautiful green gateway to the park. So I just wanted to mention that. And the next board that you see is Caltrans. Tell us about Caltrans.
So in terms of Caltrans, the biggest issue for Caltrans is twofold. First of all, we only have availability to serve them where our recycled water lines cross the freeway. So there's only a few locations where we would not have to construct a substantial amount of pipelines. And they also work from a number of services to feed their area so that they're not stringing irrigation lines for miles along the freeway. And then at the same time, Caltrans is doing a lot of work to reduce its amount of water that it uses on the freeway. So they're trying to do more efficient landscapes, more efficient irrigation systems. So it really means that the projects where you can really get the bang for the buck, where they're really still going to use enough water, are more limited in scope. So there's 3 locations, actually 2 on the 170 freeway and 1 at the 110 and 5 interchange, where there may be good opportunities. There's a number of miles alongside Griffith Park, actually, where water from the LA Glendale plant irrigates the freeways now. But there's only certain locations where we cross additional freeways with the existing lines. And so it becomes the same issue with us as far as recycled water goes, is that we're not trying to stretch our purple pipe to small uses because it'll never pay for itself. At the same time, we are looking at our recycled water as a more valuable asset than just a purple pipe system, because we ultimately want to get that back for groundwater recharge and actually angling toward direct potable reuse back at our filter plants. So we want to be very careful that the purple pipe systems that we put in place are ones that are cost effective and will actually offset potable demands. We will not let any drop of recycled water go to waste in the future. We plan to have uses for all of it, and so we're always looking for that best and highest use and the best payback for the customers.
But I think one of the things, like even right outside your building, is a beautiful 4-level interchange. And if there was some way to get down there, because you could make everything brick, and that's what they're doing at the off-ramps. They're making it brick. I remember when they took up green after Prop 13 at Rampart and Benton Way and at Alvarado, and all of a sudden it's gone. And I remember someone once complimented. Now they put sound walls up, but so we're talking about parkways, but I think there's an opportunity somehow, maybe with the state grant, to look at it. Is it difficult to pump water from Glendale, Los Angeles to Elysian Park?
We are in the process of extending that system, and that system is all working, it's all flowing downhill, so we'll be able to move water from the Griffith Park system. If you look at the elevations in Griffith Park and the elevations in Elysian, we'll be able to move that water through the Taylor Yard into the Elysian Park. So, but then the question becomes, as you spread that water further and further, you're building expensive pipelines to do that. So where are those uses where you have a lot of use of water?
But if you got to 111 North Hope, not only I would be happy, but John Farrar would be happy. So
it's possible, but it wouldn't.
I mean, you're right there.
It wouldn't make the most sense financially.
I would just hope you look at it, though. I mean, you're that close. You could throw a baseball. Use it a term there from Elysian Park. I think you could. I think Felipe could, as the Tiger from San Fernando. I don't know about you, Paul, as a Hammy guy. Underhand. Oh God, that's cold. He got you twice today. So
my right shoulder is injured. So
injured. You can't throw it off. I just think it's real important that we bang this drum. Who's in charge of reclaimed water?
So it's under our planning section, under Susan Regani and her folks.
Yeah, she's a great engineer. I just think, Mr. Chairman, just a suggestion, there should be a reclaimed water advocate like there's a film permit advocate like this, somebody whose job it is only to think for ways to do reclaim.
And we do have a recycled water master plan, and that plan's a few years old. We are actually continually looking at the options, but our goal is to work with LA Sanitation to produce as much recycled water as possible and to use it in the most cost-effective way we can.
And you pump water from Hyperion back to the airport, right?
There's a small amount of water, and that amount of water is going to grow in the future, yes.
Yeah.
It's actually not going to the airport, but it's going to Playa Vista, but ultimately we hope to pick up parts of LAX.
But you mentioned a water master plan, a reclaimed water master?
Recycle water master plan.
What's a water master?
Well, it's a water master plan, and so...
I know, what's a water master?
Well, we have a water master for the San Fernando Basin, but it's a court-appointed position, so...
Yeah, there should be a water master for reclaimed water. I'm just saying, so everybody knows, a lot of people are afraid of it. Just a thought. You know, Mr. Chair, I thank you. In a few moments, I must depart to Mount St. Mary's University to speak to students this afternoon at 4. So I thank you for both the recreation and parks and for water and power. But I just think you got to bang the drum on reclaimed water all the way. And I got to talk to Caltrans. Is anybody from Caltrans here? I got to talk to Caltrans because I think they should. I think one thing about water, it does make people feel good. Why we're a special city is because when it's clear, you got the mountains you could see, and if you're on a mountain, you could see an ocean and all that. And the same thing is true when we see bodies of water. Like I want a little check dam in the LA River so that we could at least see it instead of the concrete, but, you know, maybe another lifetime. But anyway, Mr. Adams, as always in Recreation and Parks, thank you.
We will continue to use every bit we can in the park.
What are you lecturing on, Mr. LaBonge?
Los Angeles and reclaimed water. No, I'm lecturing on the opportunity as young people, and I thank Mayor Bradley. I was on his youth council in 1974, and all of a sudden now it's 2015. It goes by fast, but just to tell young people to get involved. And also I do talk about the three important factors of Los Angeles and its ability is water and power as an economic engine, the Port of Los Angeles and Long Beach and airport. So, and Professor Erie from San Diego spoke of that. So, thank you all. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Teach them well, let them lead the way, Mr. LaBonge.
You got it, they will. They got it.
Mr. Koretz?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of questions. Long-term, I know our goal is to use a high percentage of recycled water. What are we using currently? Last I checked, it was around...
It's a very small percentage. There's actually a good amount of recycled water produced, and a lot of it's put to beneficial use, environmental uses and things like that. But as far as offsetting potable supply, there's not a lot of use right now. That will go up considerably when we're growing the purple pipe system slowly. There's more projects coming out of Terminal Island plant. We're trying to pick up some refineries and other manufacturers down there. But when the advanced treatment goes into the Tillman plant, and that's coming up, when that's completed, that'll substantially increase the amount of recycled water, and the piping is already in place to put that water in the groundwater basin and to recharge it. And then we are already working with sanitation to try to gather as much water as possible from all the sewers that could possibly be tributary to the Tillman plant to grow that, because we know we can treat wastewater to an advanced state that's as clean as drinking water. Then we'd like to ultimately introduce it back to our filter plant and put it in the system. And that way we would only be using the one system that we've already built, the one that we're investing in with our infrastructure replacement, not trying to build a complete parallel system for recycled water. One of the problems with purple pipe systems is seasonal usage. You have a lot of use in the summer, then you don't have much use in the wintertime. If we can get that water into our regular system, then we've really made a difference. And so that's where we're headed, and that's why we want to be very judicious as we expand the purple pipe system. We want to make sure we're judicious in how we do that in places that make sense. But ultimately, we have a kind of a better and higher use for as much recycled water as the city can produce.
So our recycled water is seasonal?
Well, the production of it's not seasonal, but the use, a lot of it is seasonal. Everywhere there's, Tom he'll irrigate his parks a lot more in the summertime than in the wintertime. And so, when you have your purple pipe system and your irrigation uses are the most of the uses, then you really are not using it all the time. So ultimately, we'd like to find a way to get that water treated to a higher level, get it into storage in the groundwater basins and such. Then it's there, it's not lost. We're able to catch it all the time and use it for the future for drinking water supply. It's something that's going on everywhere in the country right now, that's got water issues. And people are looking for advanced treated recycled water as really the backstop for the water supply. And ultimately, you look at the water that we're importing, 20% of the water from the State Water Project is recycled water, and it's recycled out of the cities in the north. It just comes down the river on the way to us. It's no different than what we want to do locally, but we want to put a number of engineering barriers in to make sure that water is perfectly safe to put into our systems, and then we treat it just like the rest of our water that we drink.
And on another area that may be more relevant to Mr. LaBonge, back to Griffith Park, we're obviously having a terrible drought, which has 100 different negative impacts. But one I haven't heard discussed much is the impact on the plant and wildlife life in the deeper parts of Griffith Park. So obviously we need to worry about our trees dying off and our wildlife not having any access to water. Do we have any plans for any way to address that in the deeper parts of Griffith Park?
Ramon Barajas. Well, currently, actually, we are working with Water and Power because we're trying to set up a plan where we could use bladders set next to the trees. These are like the K-rails, the plastic K-rails, we fill them with water. And right now, we're working with Stephen Cole from Water and Power, where whenever they're going to have pipes that are going to be replaced, instead of wasting the water, we're going to try to capture that water and then truck it over to these bladders in other parts of the park, and then fill the bladders up so that way some of these trees that don't have irrigation, that haven't gotten any water because of the drought, will get irrigated that way. So we're working on that. That's one of the things that we're doing. And I just wanted to say, thank you to Water and Power because they have been a great team with recreation and parks, and we do have some of our larger areas that are recycled water. We have 6 golf courses, and we should have 2 more by the end of 2017. We have sections of Griffith Park. We have Sepulveda Basin, most of the Sepulveda Basin. We have Hanson Dam. We just turned over the Hanson Dam Golf Course, which is going to save us about 170 million gallons of water a year on potable water. So thank you. And we're working to find ways everywhere to try to get the recycled water to all our parks throughout the city.
Any way to provide recycled water for the wildlife in Griffith Park? Do we do anything?
It would have to be trucked. There are some water lines in the park, and I know that they've talked about wildlife drinkers and such. So,
and there are, we do have some water bodies at golf courses, at Lake Hollywood, certain areas of the park where wildlife can eventually make their way to, possibly some of them, certain portion of the population. What we could do with the interior, the really deep interior of Griffith Park, I'm really not sure at this point. We haven't really.
Well, there's lines that are portable that the animals know.
Yes.
But to try to get a second line, it'd be tough because you don't want purple pipe where people drink.
Right.
From that.
And that becomes the issue because you do have,
Right.
Horse troughs, drinking fountains,
Right.
things scattered. So it'd be very costly to try to have 2 systems that are there for the small usage. Most of the water system in the interior of the park is there because of fire and fire risk. And so you have some other benefits from that being present for that reason, but it'd be difficult to construct a second recycled system. And that
Normally we don't have to worry about this issue too much because nature takes care of it, but it's so dry right now that at least I'd like to see us look at whether we need to truck some water to some points just to keep our wildlife.
And we do still have all the horse troughs, and we're installing some new fountains in the park and that sort of thing for the hikers and such.
What has happened, Mr. Koretz, is coyotes have gone as far south to like Vermont and Olympic and Western. They follow trails down there. I think the biggest change for wildlife too, for like coyotes, is because we have containerized trash collections. They can't knock over the cans like they used to, and so they have to be scavengers. But you're a good Democrat, right?
I'd like to think so.
The president doesn't want the Keystone Pipeline, right?
No, I'm not sure.
Let's get just a water pipeline from Canada, okay? Send it here to L.A. Is that crazy? Is that Kenny Hahn crazy?
We've looked at it.
I love Kenny Hahn,
Crazy.
But I mean, no offense, Janice, but your dad, I think that's an idea to look at. I will tell you this, though, because of the drought, I bet you there's 1,000 trees dead in Griffith Park, 1,000 trees. And I know they removed 100 just recently from Vermont Canyon, so the drought is
exactly
good.
what I'm concerned about.
Absolutely, but the
And
drought
our
and the
rain
beetle-
here actually was not so bad this year compared to up north where they actually
No.
percentage-wise had less.
Our rain was better this year than it was last year.
Right.
And
So-
if the trees are healthy, the wildlife will be fine. Anything else?
Last thing, though, the coyotes do pick on the deer, which is tough. So
Very good. We have one
All right,
speaker
thank you
card,
very
Ruth
much.
Sarnoff.
You don't like Rudolph.
Ruth Sarnoff. Thank you, gentlemen.
Okay, thank you very much.
Hey, take these.
Can I assume we've we've heard from the last 3 and 4 both, or is there going to be another presentation on number 4?
The items before us are items 3 and 4. You have 2 minutes to speak on items 3 and 4.
Thank you very much. First of all, I think watering big expanses of grass with any kind of water, I don't care what kind of water it is foolish and not thought out. On the other hand, water for zoo animals and for cleaning up after zoo animals and all that makes a lot of sense. I would also like to use this opportunity, since you mentioned the zoo, to let you know that there are no free days at the zoo, and that the cost of going to the zoo pretty much aces most of the public that's below the poverty line in Los Angeles from ever taking their kids to the zoo. I would suggest some change in that policy so that on at least one Saturday and one Sunday a month, that those days are a free day for poor people. Number 2, I support the concept of using water for trees in Griffith Park and other places. There are streets and places, particularly in South LA and some of the other areas where the trees are either pitiful or they're non-existent and have been for a long time. This should be an opportunity to try to do some greening. I also think you ought to be looking into rooftop solar. The state offered rooftop solar to people here in the state some, 10, 15 years ago, and DWP and LA Unified School District were in a lawsuit, which, by the way, DWP lost because they'd been overcharging the district. But it was not a reason not to pursue solar rooftop. You got administrative buildings,
Thank you very much.
and all kinds of public places to put solar.
Item
Go
number
solar.
4, please. I'm sorry, item number 2.
Certainly, Mr. Chair. Item number 2. Department of Water and Power report in response to motion Fuentes Bloomfield regarding the department's preliminary budget for fiscal year 2015-2016 for City Council review. You have Neil Guglielmo from the Department of Water and Power.
Come on up, Neil.
Good morning, council members Fuentes and Koretz. Neil Guglielmo with the LA Department of Water and Power. What we're going to go through today is a presentation on the 15-16 preliminary budget for the department. We provide this presentation to our Board of Commissioners back on March 17th. All right, so starting off, this is some of the key principles we have in our message from the General Manager regarding our budget as we look forward. Some of the major elements that we have as we build our budget are reliability, rates, resources and regulatory compliance, and restoring public trust and service. We just had a great presentation earlier from Jeff on the benchmarking, and a lot of the specific points that were brought up in the benchmarking I hope we can touch upon as we go through the budget presentation. So how we tied our budget changes looking forward to the next fiscal year to the mayor's priority outcome areas was something important to us. We've gone through this process, and as we look to our budget for next year, some of the highlights, how we've invested for next year include increasing funding towards customer service. There are several slides we'll talk about the increases in O&M costs, for example, the power system and water system, and that's due to the proposed hiring plan for our customer service division. So we're looking to invest quite a bit in terms of additional staffing and training and resources to provide good levels of customer service, decreasing call wait times, going after the accounts receivables as well. Continued investment in our critical infrastructure, which is very key for us. As has been discussed earlier, we just have a lot of pipe, transmission lines, distribution lines. All of our various system-related infrastructure is critical. It's aging, and we have to continue to invest in that infrastructure replacement and sustainability. Transitioning to local energy and water supplies, increasing system reliability, compliance with the regulatory mandates, and then as we look towards our proposed spend for the coming fiscal year, that outside spend in contracts, professional services, construction materials and such helps to support the local economy and helps to promote job growth as well. So those are some of the major elements that tie to the mayor's priority outcome areas. As we look at the budget requirements, City Charter Section 511 requires that our board adopt an annual receipts and appropriations budget for the Department of Water and Power. We transmit our preliminary budget by the end of March of each year and the final budget by the end of May of each year. So this just gives a highlight regarding the documents that we have included in our budget submittal to the mayor and the City Council. Okay. So now we're going to jump into our presentation, some overview. Cost savings. So what has our department done? Over the last several fiscal years, the department has engaged in a cost reduction program, saving over $466 million. That's in a 3 fiscal year period. Fiscal years 11-12, 12-13, and 13-14. Our target was approximately $450 million for our savings, and we actually achieved a greater level of savings than that. Savings were achieved in a number of areas, reductions in funded positions. We decreased the position count by about 600 positions through a combination of elimination of vacancies as well as through attrition. In addition to that, we've reduced overtime costs over that 3 fiscal year period and reduced costs in a number of other areas, including outside travel and some of the purchases of equipment such as PC replacement. That life cycle was extended to 5-year period. So we purchased the PCs less frequently. That all has saved money. In addition to that, we've had a new labor contract which saves, again, $456 million over 4 years and approximately $5 billion over 30 years. As was discussed earlier, when we're looking at those the new pension tier and those savings, we're going to realize a greater level of savings as we have that attrition, as the workforce turns over and more employees are hired under the Tier 2, then we'll realize an increased level of savings as we move forward. In addition to that, we've had a lot of refinancing of our bonds and our debt. That's going to save over $267 million. And then through the corporate performance activities, looking at the benchmarking and the metrics, we're hoping to continue to instill a level of efficiency and look for opportunities to reduce costs and control costs. For accomplishments, I'm going to hit this slide over here. What I want to focus on, you can see someone there replacing lights. That's the energy efficiency program. But if you look at that middle picture, that replacement of the transformers, we had a heat storm back in 2007. If you compare the results of the outages from that heat storm in 2007, there were approximately 674 transformer failures. When you look at 2014, so this follows the reliability program, the replacement of many of those transformers, the transformer failures decreased substantially down to 189 transformer failures. So by making that investment of replacing those transformers and the infrastructure as we proposed, then what we're hoping to do is continue to see that decrease in the impacts to our ratepayers. Looking at the total outages over 24 hours for our customers, the decrease from 2007 to the 2014 heat storm was actually 99% decrease. So again, that investment really pays off in terms of increased reliability. Okay, now we're going to turn to some accomplishments here in terms of water. When it comes to our water system, what I'd like to point out there is you'll see the conservation, the funding that we're increasing conservation activities, but also that reliability program, that infrastructure, the 100,000 feet of main line per year. And what we're hoping to do is not just budget for the next fiscal year, but looking out many years. We actually budget with our organizations within the department out 10 years, but where you can really be more sharply focused on the numbers is within a 5-year period of time. And so what we're working on right now with the organizations is that 5-year financial plan and what that will mean for us in terms of investment in our infrastructure and how we drive the needle on reliability forward. Okay, so now we're talking about that need for continued and sustained investment. We had the rate action back in 2012 that was approved by our board and by the City Council and the Mayor. In that rate action, there was a water quality adjustment factor that was approved, as well as a 2-year power rate increase. There was quite a bit of public education that was done as part of that effort, and it was described as essentially the beginning of a continued need, a long-term need for sustained rate changes for our agency. Now, looking at the 15-16 budget, as I mentioned earlier, we'll be coming back to our board in May for our final budget, and what's before you today really is just our preliminary budget, our draft budget, as it were. And within this preliminary budget, we have looked at what our needs are for our work programs, what we'd like to achieve in terms of investment infrastructure and reliability, and this budget reflects those investments. Competitive rates now. So as we compare ourselves to other municipal entities as well as privately owned utility companies, this just shows you a 3-year snapshot, a typical residential customer within LUP, our levels of consumption. That same level of consumption, if you were to look at that customer being in San Diego, Simi Valley, San Francisco, or Pasadena, you just see what the savings are that our customers have realized given the structure and level of our rates. So San Diego being much higher than us, a customer for that same 3-year period, 2012 through 2015, would pay approximately $1,500 or more than our customer here at LADVP. That's, again, combined water and power. So this is our key expenditure plan for the power. Just highlight some of the major items within the Power Revenue Fund budget. The operating expenses, non-renewables, renewables, feed-in tariff, emissions costs, fuel and purchase power, our O&M, property tax, depreciation, city transfer, and so forth. And, we're going to go, these next several slides, you'll see, we'll highlight how those changes actually appear by our major programs. So this is a summary of those key programs. Our Power System Reliability Program, which is really the rapidly aging backbone. It's our GT&D, our Generation, Transmission, Substation, Distribution Systems. Our Power Supply Replacement Program, the repowering, the Customer Opportunity Programs, feed-in tariff, energy efficiency, solar incentives, and demand response. Customer Service Programs, operating support, power system support general. So this first slide here is capital. So as you can see, for the capital, the proposed spending for the 15-16 is an increase from the $1.4 million estimated for the 14-15 year. That's both approved and estimated, to the just under $1.6 million in 15-16. You'll see some increases there. For reliability is probably the largest increase, but you'll see the changes in funding as well for the Power Supply Replacement Program. That's where the timing of some of our capital projects. Power System Support General, Customer Opportunities is increasing, and then highlighted in the top left is that Customer Opportunities, just so you can see that by itself and how it's increasing from the 12-13 actuals of just under $100 million to the proposed level of funding, which is just under $200 million, so roughly doubling. Our O&M. Obviously, what we like to do as an organization is maintain the controls as tight as possible for our O&M costs while maintaining reliability. So you will see some growth there. The largest element of growth, the one I'd like to highlight actually, is our increased spend for customer service. So looking at where we're going from the current fiscal year to the next fiscal year, we're increasing by roughly $18 million the amount of funding for customer service activities. A lot of this going directly into the staffing resources to support customer service programs. For fuel and purchase power, you'll see the structure there of renewables there at the top. The fuel and purchase power costs are increasing from just about 1.5 to 1.57 for next year. Non-renewables are actually coming down. Natural gas is going up slightly. Coal and nuclear is remaining fairly consistent. CO emissions is going down, and feed-in tariff is at 60. Now we're going to go to our water revenue fund. Here's our key expenditure plan summary here. What I'd like to point out for the water revenue fund is under the operating expenses, that first item there, that purchase water number, the 209. So when we were developing this preliminary budget, it was in the earlier portion of the winter, before we had the benefit of knowing exactly what was going to happen with the rainfall and the snowpack up in the Sierras, where you get quite a bit of our water. So that proposed amount for the purchased water is going up. We are realizing that. And as we work this month to finalize the budget to then go back to our board in May, we'll have updated numbers on the purchased water, reflective of just what's happened with our snowpack this year. Again, a key program summary. So our key programs are safe drinking water at the very top, water infrastructure, water supply and remediation, so that's the groundwater, stormwater capture, increase in our local supply. Regulatory compliance, the Owens Valley program, customer service, and operating support. Capital. So you'll see there that our capital is increasing. Our proposal is to substantially increase the investment in our capital program for infrastructure and reliability, going from just a little over $700 million this year to just under $900 million proposed for 15-16. Large increases there, investments in safe drinking water, water infrastructure. Local supply is going up by about 60. And then operating support and customer service. Operations and maintenance. So for operations and maintenance, like we saw with the power revenue fund, one of the increases here to highlight is the customer service. It is increasing by just under $6 million to next year. Again, that's to support the levels of increased staffing for our customer relations programs. That's reducing call wait times and everything else. Purchase water, again, this was based on the information we had earlier in the winter. We have updated numbers that are still coming in, and as we get through April, we'll have updated numbers to provide for the coming fiscal year, which will be higher than what is shown right now. Staffing. So where we're at now, we have approximately 9,100 staffed positions within the department. As we look towards the next fiscal year, we're proposing to increase that labor funding for approximately just under 300 positions. Most of that is to enhance customer service. There's also some additional positions there to support the various customer opportunities, such as rebates, energy efficiency within our Office of Sustainability, as well as some key program support for water and power, that's staffing for the infrastructure programs and the crews, some succession planning. As you see here in the note, we have approximately 2,200 employees, or roughly 24% of our workforce, that's eligible to retire in the coming fiscal year. Over a 5-year period, that increases to roughly 40%. So, how do we capture the knowledge and the experience we have from the current staff and transfer that to new staff as they come on board is absolutely critical for us. We just can't afford to lose all that experience that we have with our great crews and staff of the department. And just some next steps. Again, we went to our board in March. We're going back to our board in May for the final budget presentation. And then we will transmit our budget prior to the end of May in accordance with the charter mandate. And that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer questions.
Mr. Gretz?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Not directly budget related, but I'll ask it anyway since it just popped up. I'm somewhat concerned that we have so much anticipated turnover, and I don't know if we have actually allowed for that, both, as you mentioned, in trying to avoid the brain drain without at least training people quickly, but whether we're looking at this adequately enough to respond from a personnel standpoint and actually hire all the people we need to hire in a relatively short period of time. I'm kind of nervous that we're going to be caught with our pants down, and we'll save a little bit budget-wise by having a smaller staff, but that's not going to be a good thing for very long. That's an absolutely great point. I know that our department has been working very closely with the personnel department, looking at those critical classifications, because we know in which classifications how many of our employees could be eligible within that period of time to retire. And so in looking at those critical classes, working with the personnel department to get those exams up and running, so we'll have viable civil service lists to hire from. Because that's been one of the challenges in the past, is if
If a list isn't available to us to hire from, that's going to slow down the hiring process. So part of it is just having those civil service exams, having those lists ready and available to us. Another part is we have tools to work with in terms of interim authorities, just like the city uses substitute position authorities. We in the Department of Water and Power. I used to work for Public Works. So in the Department of Water and Power, we also use substitute position authorities, and we've been working with all of our organizations to look at where that exposure lies within the classifications and where it would make sense to bring in some new staff via the substitute position authorities so they can work with those seasoned, experienced staff before they depart. So that's another key point. And then I know this is also very visible as we work with the Ratepayer Advocate's Office. We provide information to them regarding our training programs for our professional, our linemen, all the electric distribution mechanics, and those sort of critical classifications. And so I know they're also very aware of it, and they're kind of keeping their thumb on the pulse of that hiring effort. But absolutely, it's something that's got to be forefront in our minds, and we have to do as much as we possibly can. The one thing I will tell you that is good is that through the end of February this fiscal year, we realized about 170 retirements. So while there's a lot of folks eligible to go, they're not actually retiring yet. So, how we can continue to retain those really valuable employees is critical, and just having all the resources available for us so that we can fill those positions, and train up replacement staff when that time comes. But great point. We are working on that.
And just one completely different question. How much money do we expect that we can try to pull in from water bond funding and emergency drought funding that the governor has just announced and all that? How will that impact this year's budget?
So let me see if Marty Adams, our expert on water, is still here.
So there's some recent announcement about more drought funding available. Actually, what the governor did a few days ago, he announced about $1 billion of funding. A lot of that was money that's already in play for Prop 1. What he did was accelerate by a year when it would become available. There's a question as to whether all the rules will be in place. We just had a meeting with one of the state agencies this morning, and some money will be available in the near term. Some is still a ways away. But the only thing he really added was some emergency relief for communities where they just don't have any water. The state maybe bringing in bottled water or other sources. So there's a question whether there's any really new money than what we were already anticipating. We know that as a city, we're going to target to get at least $600 million of water bond money. Then that would leverage $1.2 billion in projects because it's a 50-50 cost share. And that's to break even as a city versus what our residents would be paying back in their taxes to the state for the water bond. We have higher aspirations.
Isn't it $701 million according to the Rebates?
I thought it was 600.
Break even? The break even on Prop 1, I thought it was $701 million.
601? I thought it was
Okay, give or take $100 million.
right.
Okay.
But we have great aspirations. So we have a groundwater treatment plant that we look for 50-50 cost share plus money from the polluters, and so we hope to have a very small impact on the ratepayers for that. We have a lot of recycled water programs going on, particularly expanding plants at Hyperion and Tillman in the Valley, and with LA Sanitation, so we're hoping that they'll be getting hundreds of millions of dollars of bond funding for that. And then we have our other programs. There may recently be some money available for things such as turf rebates. Just in today's governor's announcement, they talked about backstopping the turf rebates. We've been kind of clamoring because there's a lot of money being spent right now. That's the one program that's out there that's actually going to save water this summer besides just asking people to stop watering. And so, but there's been no funding for those kind of programs. So we're hoping that the state's going to step up in that area. At the same time, State Revolving Fund is going strong. We continue to get money from that. We met with Health Department this morning. They're looking to continue to make money available as fast as possible in that process, and clarified how they're going to basically put a lot of programs into a similar process, so we can just put your application in, we'll find some kind of funds of some kind to get to you. So we hope to fund hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars of projects.
But the point is, none of that money is in your budget.
We have anticipation in our budget, and Neil can explain where it shows up. We show costs in our budget for what we're going to spend. Neil talk about how the money comes in.
Right. So when we look at our funding for the coming fiscal year, obviously we're looking at the money's coming in from our ratepayers, but also how we're going to go out and issue debt, for example. So to the extent that we have state monies coming in or we use state loan monies, then that just delays or defers or reduces the amount of debt that we have to issue. So we'll use that money first, that less expensive money for our capital.
So our costs in terms of projects are not any different in terms of what we're going to spend to do. It's a question of how do we defer the costs of doing that work. So where we have, like right now we've collected about $850 million of state revolving fund money. That alone will save about $500 million of interest payments over 30 years. So those, and then that decreases in the securitization. We have securitization in the budget, and that's the Assemblyman Nazarian's bill, AB 850. And by doing that and including the projects under that we already have in the budget, we need 3% less money in the future to cover that, and that's reflected in the budget.
Correct.
And one last question. Have you looked at the Met action in which we'll be kind of fined if we don't conserve a certain amount of water, and unfortunately wasn't really favorable to Los Angeles, so the places that haven't done a damn thing will have to reduce by the same percentage as we will. So it's going to be difficult. Have we taken into account the possibility that we won't necessarily meet those targets and we'll have to pay more?
We're hoping, so what's going to happen in April, the Met Board will be asked to vote on allocations. And so when allocation will basically be a percent reduction that they're willing to sell you at the regular price. And so we know that there's a certain level that we can withstand within the conservation that the city's achieved and that we're doing the right thing and being right on target. There's another level that's kind of dicey, and then beyond that, if the level's higher than that, we'll probably be in trouble. And our concern is what the baseline is that we're being judged against, since the city's been making huge investments above and beyond what anybody else has done to save water since well, for a long time, but certainly since 2007. And so we're hoping to get full credit for the efforts that we've made when others have not made the level of efforts that we have. But it really depends on the allocation. If Met sets something that's very stringent, then what's out there is that we could pay the going price of water plus about another $1,500 an acre foot penalty on top of that. And if you exceed, I think, 10% beyond your allocation, then you could go about a 15%, or probably about another 50% on top of that penalty. So there's some huge risks out there. We believe that they should fall in a reasonable range, and the efforts that the citizens are making right now should keep us within that. But we won't know for sure until the Met Board takes its vote.
Right. It's not clear whether we win that issue or not. And there are places that have done almost nothing while we've done pretty dramatic conservation.
Yeah, it's disappointing. That's one of the reasons
right now they could be treated the same as we are, which would be ridiculous.
Right. And like today, we're happy that the governor's made the statements he has, because what he's asking everyone to do is very reflective of exactly what LA has been doing.
Thank you.
Dr. Pickle, come on up. As you come up, Dr. Pickle, I wanted to ask you, Neil, so sure. We celebrate in this document at least that you all were able to save about $466 million on the fact that we've eliminated vacancies, attrition, other sort of deals over the last 3 years. Is there a goal in this FY 14-15 budget to realize any additional savings?
So what we've done is the savings that really has helped us those last several years when we haven't had the rate action post 2014. So for that period of time where we haven't had the rate action, that level of savings has assisted us. What's happening is we're finding that to get to that level of investment in infrastructure that we need, it's a combination of contracts and department staff that's required to perform that work. And we also are anticipating that turnover as well. So what we're doing is we're actually we've been staffing up. So we were at that 8,900 point was the low point on the end of that 3-year period of cost savings. We're at 9,100 filled right now. So we have increased staffing since then. Our proposal is to further increase staffing again for those key elements, the customer service, investment staffing, as well as the key infrastructure programs as well. So in order for us to achieve the level of work we want to accomplish, it's required that we hire more staff. So continuing to hold the vacancies is going to be very problematic for us. We're actually going to have to increase our spend as we look forward. Now, other things where we have realized savings, we realized savings on the overtime. We've realized savings based on the labor negotiations, the fact that we don't have COLAs built into our contracts for a couple of years. That's all going to still help us control costs. We very actively look at the O&M costs as well. While you see that it is increasing slightly, we've actually had decreases in O&M, or O&M is remaining flat. And that's very important. You want to maintain the reliability, but control those O&M costs, because dollar for dollar, that has a larger impact on rates to our customers. So the more we can invest in infrastructure and get those infrastructure programs in place, as Jeff was saying earlier in the benchmarking, that's going to help us further control those O&M costs. So we are looking for every opportunity to control costs, to see where there potentially still could be efficiencies realized. Looking at the debt as we go forward, that's that $267 million. So there still are opportunities for us to realize some savings there as well. And we're going to continue to peel the onion back as we do benchmarking to the more granular level of information. Then I think there'll be more potential opportunities for us to further decrease costs as well. But what the budget shows right now, what it reflects, is that that modest investment, frankly, in trying to get towards that infrastructure spend that we'd like to get to. And we're going to continue to control staffing, but if we're going to realize that level of infrastructure replacement, we're going to have to invest more in staffing and some contracts and materials and supplies as well.
Is that where primarily the $159 million on the power side, $140 million on the water side, is that primarily what it's going to go to?
Yes.
And so you're building a budget based on those additional sort of revenues. Are you factoring in there anywhere goals to mitigate how much it is that you're going to ask for in rate increases by getting those accounts receivables under control and the losses?
Absolutely. I mean, that's part of our financial planning process. When we develop our budget, we move into the financial plans where we look at those financial metrics that Jeff had talked about as well in his presentation. And so for us, it's all about how do we minimize the impact to ratepayers while still providing them with that really high-quality, reliable power and water services. And so absolutely, that's what we're working on right now is those financial plans.
So the $299 million in increased revenues is not solely rate increases at this point?
Correct. I mean, it's going to be a combination of, as we talked about earlier, where we've saved costs, where we potentially will save costs going forward through, say, the JPA efforts to reduce the, capital costs, as well as any other opportunities we have. If there's opportunities to get our resources more cheaply, if we can realize through hedging efforts as well. We talk about purchasing of natural gas, for example, which is one of our critical resources. So we're looking for every opportunity, any dial we can change that would reduce costs yet still continue to provide the services. We're still doing that now.
Very good. Dr. Pickle.
Fred Pickle, Office of Public Accountability. This is a preliminary budget, and we're working with the department to make comments on this for the purposes of the final budget. But in addition, I think this shows the level of cooperation with the department. I want to compliment them on their benchmarking activity that was required as part of the last 2012 rate increase. And I think as both as we've heard in both presentations, the benchmarking is informing the investment. And that's important in this process, and we look to see that helping things further as they dig deeper into the second phase.
Very good. Very good. There's no additional comments or questions. We will go ahead, and I do not believe I've got a card on this item. We'll go ahead and note and file the report on preliminary budget for fiscal year 2015-16. In as much as it is submitted for informational purposes at this point, we'll request the department to report back on updates, changes to the proposed FY 15-16 budget.
Thank you very much.
Very good. And Mr. Prieto, to clarify, items 3 and 4, those were both noted and filed.
Okay, fantastic.
As the actions. Very good. That brings us to general public comment. Ruth Sarnoff.
I think all of you got my information about the $265 million transfer and my questioning of that, which has been going on for some, I think at least maybe as much as 2 decades. And the question becomes, if you just looked at the money that's been transferred, if it had been going in to replacing pipes and doing the necessary infrastructure work, which was not being done during the time period when all this money gets transferred from the Department of Water and Power into the general fund to patch up the budget. It's not good bookkeeping. First of all, debt is a big issue, and debt goes to private people who make lots of money, such that we've seen this massive transfer of wealth in America that's just astounding. It's even astounding to the world to look at it. And now we have opportunities because solar is becoming much more economical. I would really have to question the remark made by one of the previous speakers just after I spoke, and it came back up again. First of all, nuclear and natural gas, which may be clean coming out of the tailpipe, it is not clean in its production. It's part of the fracking process. And if you have a position opposing fracking and the Exxon pipeline and trying to make the conversion before climate change changes everything in our lives profoundly, you better look at the big picture. And I will close.
Very good. Thank you. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Again, into the public record.